Hello all, welcome to Selenium Python Training Series. In this session, as part of PyTest, I am going to explain and practically demonstrate how to use scope attribute in PyTest Fixture. That is how to specify the scope attribute in PyTest Fixture. So let's get started. There are 5 varieties in which you can specify the scope attribute in PyTest Fixture. That is, you can specify scope is equal to function in the PyTest Fixture, or scope is equal to session in PyTest Fixture, or scope is equal to class, scope is equal to package, scope is equal to module in PyTest Fixture. Out of these 5 types, the first 2 are the important ones. That is, scope is equal to function, scope is equal to session. Let me practically demonstrate the first 2 scope types now. For that, I'll switch to this Pycharm ID, where we have the sample Python files containing the test methods. Okay, there are 2 test methods in every sample Python file here. For sample, there are 2 test methods. And here we have this fixture method created inside this conf_test.py file as part of the previous sessions, right? Now, in the previous session, I covered this attribute, that is auto use is equal to true. Along with this attribute, you can also specify one more attribute that I'm covering in this session. That is none other than the scope attribute. You can specify the scope attribute in this fixture. You can simply say scope is equal to, there are 5 varieties, right? Scope is equal to function, class, module, package, session, any of these things you can write. I'm going to cover function and session in this session. So in double quotes, I'll give function as a first variety. So when you specify function here, this setup code will run before every test method, and tear down code will run after every test method. Okay, before every test method, the setup code in this fixture method will run. After every test method got executed, the tear down code will run. Okay, because the scope is function level. That is, for every test level, before the test, setup code will run. After the test, tear down code will run. Okay, so here there are 6 tests. So before every test, the setup code will run, and after every test, the tear down code will run. That's what is mean by scope is equal to function. Let me show you that. So let me run this test. I'll open this, I'll right click on this project and say open in Explorer. I'll go to the location in my machine where this project is available, open this project, and here I'll type CMD. It will open in command prompt. The path will directly come in command prompt, the project path. Here I'll type the PyTest commands for running this particular test. So for every test, before the test, the setup code will run. After the test, in all these Python projects, Python files, the tear down code will run. Okay, PyTest -vs. Okay, that's it. PyTest -vs, all the tests will run. No? Press enter. You see all the 6 out of 6 tests got run, and you see the setup code got run, then test got run, and then tear down. For every test method, setup code, test, and tear down. Setup code, test, tear down. Setup code, test, tear down. Like that. For every test method, setup code, test, and tear down got run, because the scope is mentioned at which level? Function level. So by default, if you don't specify scope attribute also, its scope is equal to function only. Okay. So if I remove this scope is equal to function, you will get the same output, because by default the scope is set to function level only, whether you specify here or not. Internally it is specified as scope is equal to function only. Okay, let me run this without specifying that scope is equal to function. PyTest yes, you will get the same output. All the 6 out of 6 tests will run. Every test, setup code, test, tear down code, setup code, test, and tear down code. For all the 6 tests, the same thing happened, right? Now I'll explain the second one, that is scope is equal to session. Okay, in place of scope is equal to function, or by default whatever, if you don't specify, both are scope is equal to function only. Now if I specify scope is equal to session, what will happen here? I'll simply say scope is equal to session. If I give scope is equal to session, what will happen is, before all the tests, the setup code will run only one time. Setup code will run only one time. After that, all the tests will run. All the 6 out of 6 tests will run. At the end, tear down code will run. Okay, only one time the setup code will run for all the tests at only one time. Instead of every time for every test it is running, the setup code is going to run only one time in the beginning of the session, and during the session, all the 6 tests will run one by one. Okay, and after the 6 tests got completed, tear down code will run. Only once it will run. Only once it will run. Okay, so when scope is equal to function, this setup and tear down has run for each and every test. But here, this setup code will run only one time when the scope is set to session, and the tear down code will run only once after all the tests are done. Okay, before all the tests are executed, setup code only once. After all the tests are executed, tear down code only once. Okay, so let me say CLS and say PyTest -vs. You will see that only one time the setup and tear down code will run. Let me run it again. PyTest -vs. You see, here the setup code has run in the beginning only once. After that, all the tests, test 1, test 2, test 3, test 4, test 5, test 6, all the 6 tests got executed, and the tear down code has run only once at the end. So this is what happens when you set the scope to session. Okay. So it's better not to provide the scope, or if you provide that as scope is equal to function, so that the setup and tear down will run for every function. If you specify scope is equal to session, only one time before the test, all the tests, and only one time after the test, the tear down code will run. Okay. So this is how we can change the value of the scope, and accordingly, the things will change on the PyTest fixture. Okay. The setup and tear down code will run either once or each time once for each and every test method. Okay. Depending on the scope specified. So remaining things you can try out by yourself. These are the important ones that I wanted to cover. I covered in this session. So that's all for this session. See you in the next session. Thank you. Bye-bye.